Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's great to have so many of you with us for this latest IMI webinar. This is one of a regular series of webinars that IMI is hosting to support members, students, learners, centres through this crisis. Follows on from one hosted by Steve Nash, Chief Executive, last week. Today we're focused on the challenges facing centres and learners during this period. It's a tough time, obviously, for a lot of people, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there. But we hope to, clear some of that uncertainty and answer your questions today. I certainly know that the team from IMI is really pushing hard to support centres, members through this period. I'm Matthew Rock. I'm part of the team that works on Motor Pro, which is IMI's magazine. I'm just here to facilitate the session. We'll move on to the agenda for today, and we'll just run you through what's going to take place. In a minute, we're going to just run through a survey that was done with more than 100 centres to find out about the challenges that you're facing. And then we're going to go through the key areas that where you wanted answers, and we've brought together a group of people to do that. I'll introduce them in a second. This opening session will take about 30 minutes. And then we're going to leave about 30 minutes for Q&A, 25, 30 minutes for live Q&A. If you want to ask a question during the session, please use the Q&A button, which should be at the bottom of your screen. Type in your question. Some of your questions, if we can answer them straight away, then we'll do it right now, or we'll take the questions at the end of the session. If we don't get to all the questions, then we will address them online or directly afterwards. The IMI is updating its COVID-19 hub regularly. You can see the URL at the bottom of the slides. So check in with that, and we will answer as many questions as we can there if we don't get to them today. What else do I need to tell you? I think really, probably now we should meet the real stars of the day. So let's have a look at who we've got on the panel just to support you through this session. We've got four experts from the IMI. Mark Armitage, who heads up IMI's membership products and services. We've got Tony Lawson, Chris Cotterill, and Stephen Longworth. So it's great to have you all here with us, guys, and thanks for your time. We're really looking forward to getting your thoughts. What we're going to do is we're going to kick off by asking Steve to talk us through the survey findings. We've got a couple of technical problems with the slides, but don't worry about that. We'll sort them out in the background. But Steve, if you can hear me okay, and if you unmute yourself, and maybe just let us know about the survey that we've done and how the issues that you've identified among the centres.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. Good morning, everyone. Since the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, the IMI has been working extremely hard to continue to support our members, our centres and the industry through these very challenging and difficult times. On the 23rd of March, our amazing Marcoms team launched a short online survey to the Approved Centre Network, requesting information initially on the number of learners who might be affected by this situation. Those centres that engaged were then asked to complete a more detailed survey by letting us know which learners we're expecting to complete by September and the assessments that they were outstanding. And unfortunately, as Matthew said, we seem to have a small problem with the slides. They aren't moving on at the moment. But given the extraordinary circumstances we find ourselves in, a fifth of our global approved IMI approved centre network responded to that second survey, and as Matthew said, over 100 centres engaged with us and provided with us with a lot more detailed information. And from that, we captured almost 1,000 lines of data, and it demonstrated to us just how many learners were being affected. And we also asked the centres to identify the issues they were facing during this time. And the thread which ran through all the responses was really to do with our, mainly our VRQ, vocational related qualifications, and the VCQ, NVQ, SVQ, the work-based qualifications. And the main themes coming through was the inability, if you like, to carry out assessments on learners, and for them to be able to progress the learners through our online tests if they were outstanding, and the skills element and the competency element of both the VRQ and the work-based qualifications. So we totally understand that, and we're doing everything we can to facilitate. If you weren't already aware, it is permissible to carry out remote work-based assessments through live streaming video. That is stated in our current IMI SSC VCQ assessment strategy. So if you feel that as people may return to work, if you wish to carry out remote assessments by video streaming, then don't hesitate to contact your EQA, who will guide you through that process. There is a process to follow, and you need to give us some information before we can allow that. In relation to the online testing system and future access to that, we are working really closely with the regulator, and we have designed and we've got ready-made processes. As you would expect, they're quite strict and quite rigorous, but we have written processes and strategy around the remote invigilation of IMI online tests. And we're waiting for the green light from the regulator in relation to their extraordinary framework for qualifications that we are in dialogue with. And I know Mark in a little while will comment on that framework, the Ofqual framework. So rest assured, we are doing everything we possibly can to support you. We are all available at the IMI. Your EQAs, external quality assurers in your region, are available to offer you guidance and support. And together, we will do our best to not disadvantage your learners, our candidates, and so that in a little while, they may be able to achieve their qualifications. So apologies for the slides, but that's all from me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's great stuff. I think we'll move on to Chris next, and just to get a bit of a flavour for some of the resources that IMI are making available. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Stephen. So hi, everybody. Yes, I'm going to be talking to you today about some of the additional tools and resources that we have available to support both yourself and your learners to aid their progression, during lockdown and on our way to a lockdown restriction. But before I go into that in detail, I just wanted to mention that both myself and my business development team have witnessed some excellent good practice from you, our centre network. It's clear to us that you've been investing heavily in a blended learning solution over recent years, and that's paid dividends, because as soon as the lockdown came into effect, you were instantly be able to flick the switch and transition the majority of your learning over to remote distance learning, and you've been maintaining progression admirably. So well done, you've been doing a great job. In fact, I had a meeting last week with one of our independent training providers, and they very proudly, and rightly so, were telling me that they've managed to do learner reviews, progress reviews with 98% of their learner cohort during the lockdown period. So that's a staggering figure. So you're doing a great job, everybody. So on to additional support. So Matthew at the beginning did refer to our COVID hub. On the 2nd of April, we launched our brand new website, which we're exceptionally proud of. And on there is a COVID-19 hub, which our Marcoms team are updating as regularly as possible. So it's worth visiting that on a daily basis because we are updating it, almost daily in some cases. That's a great area of support, information and guidance. There are areas for members, for centres, for learners, for business owners. And in particular, the centre section has got a frequently asked questions area. And the detail of that area has been provided by you during the response to the survey that Steve was talking about. So all of all the data that we captured have informed the development of this page and the frequently asked questions. So it should be a one-stop shop solution for information, advice and guidance to help you. So please visit that resource. Moving on to a couple of other areas that I wanted to just highlight within our student membership platform. So firstly, I'd like to encourage those centres that are listening to make sure that as many of your learners as possible have signed up for the free student membership platform. It's been redeveloped in line with the new website, really engaging, loads of great content on there to help with their progression, ranging from really good high quality technical resources, including written articles plus videos for them to watch and to learn from. Importantly, during this lockdown, where mental health is a major concern for people, there's an awful lot of great resources for wellbeing and to support young people with their mental health issues, which is clearly an area of concern for us all at the moment. There are blogs, competitions, and the usual discounts associated with student membership platforms. And for a lot of apprentices at the moment who are furloughed and on reduced income potentially, any discounts will be gratefully received, I'm sure. And for those tutors out there who are watching at the moment, I don't know whether you're aware, but there is a student tutors section within the student membership platform. And within that, there is a whole host of useful resources, tools, posters, leaflets, lesson plans, resources, PowerPoints. There's a wealth of, a plethora of information there for you to help you support your learners, including those on apprenticeship standards and qualifications and everything in between. So great resources, they're free of charge. Please make sure that you and your learners are taking advantage of them during this period. And that moves on to something that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, and that's what to expect going forwards post-lockdown release. And there are an awful lot of things to consider from a training provider's perspective. Now, clearly, we're all going to get more information from the government this coming week. And actually, we've got a follow-up webinar scheduled for next week, which will go into this in much more detail for the whole industry, not just training provision. So fairly recently, I was in a position of responsibility for a vehicle manufacturer's apprenticeship program, a national residential program. So I put myself back into those shoes, and I've been thinking long and hard about the type of things that I would be thinking about now to gear up my program ready for delivery in a post-lockdown scenario where there's likely to be some ongoing social distancing restrictions for a number of months to come. So things to consider for me ought to be, well, if I'm delivering with social distancing in mind, it's likely that my class sizes are going to be smaller than I'm used to. So what would that mean from a scheduling perspective? Will my training calendar need to look different? You know, are group sizes going to be smaller? What's the impact on facility and duration of learning that that might have? have a think about the flow of people around the facility, around the site. Are you going to have lanes in corridors? How are you going to manage shared areas? Things like the canteen, for example, is clearly going to need fewer people in there. Are you going to have to stagger lunch times over a longer period to get the throughput through? How are you going to manage the cleaning of equipment, tooling, resources? In a practical environment, for example, if you're teaching technical training and you have a number of people doing the same task on the same vehicle throughout the day, is there a cleaning procedure that needs to be done on that vehicle and that equipment in between learners using it, for example? Do you have sufficient hand wash stations? Do you need to work in hand washing breaks into your working day for both your staff and your learners? Do you need to review all of your risk assessments and control measures so that it's thought about from a compliance point of view? For those providers out there that manage residential national programs, have you thought about the journey the learner will take from home into the accommodation or into the training centre? How can you mitigate the risk there? How can you help your learners stay safe and make the right decisions? Have you thought about asking questions of your accommodation provider? I know from experience that many residential programs have room sharing. Perhaps that's a thing of the past. Maybe it's only sole occupancy from this point forwards. If that's the case, what impact does that have on learner volumes and ongoing costs that are then passed on to the employer? How much of a cost increase would be palatable right now, if any? So there's loads to consider. The transport from the accommodation into the hotel. Do you need fewer people on those coaches? Does it mean 2 or 3 coaches instead of 1? What's the impact that has on the coach supplier? Are they able to provide that for you? So there's a whole host of questions you need to be thinking about and asking yourself, ready to maximise the opportunity in catching up learner progress, and also engaging with all your new recruits and new starters as we move into a new academic year in September. And clearly, Ben is the automotive charity for our industry. They're doing wonderful work to support the sector at the moment, and perhaps now they're needed more than ever. So don't forget that they're there for you, your staff, your learners. In your hour and time of need, they're there to support you. So let's all support Ben in any way possible. The IMI themselves this year in our centenary year have got a target of raising £100,000 for Ben. That's still very much on plan. So and any ideas, any charitable events that you're running, all donations to Ben will be gratefully received, because they're a charity that's really needed right now. So in terms of recruitment, then, that moves us on nicely to the next slide, where I believe Mark's going to take over this one. So Mark, on to you.
Thanks, Chris. And just to cover off, Chris has given us an awful lot of information there for you all to be thinking about. I'm sure you're already considering a number of these things. One of the things that's probably really impacting you at the moment is considering the assessments that are still required for your current learners before we move on to the new learners. And I've had a question come through from Tony, who's asking whether they may need to be delayed. And if anyone that was on the webinar a couple of weeks ago will know that the Ofqual framework consultations running at the moment till Friday. But it's clear that a number of the competence-based technical qualifications will sit in a delay category. So scheduling, re-looking at your schedule is critical at the moment. You know, those of you that operate in a normal college environment that may have summer holidays coming up, and I'm not sure if there's been any conversations around that yet, to maybe facilitate some work happening during the summer period when we understand what the government's position is on the lockdown situation. Obviously trying to cram in an awful lot of assessments at a time when you're also bringing new starts in, aligned with possible social distancing challenges, sounds like an awful lot of things to try and juggle. But you know, please keep in touch with us around that. As Steve mentioned earlier, there are a number of things that we can do today to try and align mapping of evidence, etc., with regards to some of the practical competences. Moving on to the future then, and apprentice recruitment. I've been really glad to see that a lot of you are being very active still on looking at recruitment. There's going to be an awful lot of potential school leavers that are probably sat at home right now. Best way to engage with them is through some level of social media interaction. Having children myself of around that age, I've got a middle son who's 15 and an older son who's 20. I know that maybe things like Facebook aren't the best way to get in front of them, but certainly Instagram and those kind of platforms are a great opportunity to get your messages and your options in front of young people. Not that all apprentices are young, obviously. But with regards to what we can do to help, we have a couple of key functions here that you may or may not be aware of. On the right-hand side of your screen, we've got our web-based solutions, web-based information that show an awful lot of information around apprenticeships in automotive. And obviously that's far wider than the traditional technical roles that a lot of people would have been engaged with. In England, for apprenticeship standards, we're currently approved for 18 different routes, ranging through team leader, supervisor, customer service, into other technical areas other than cars and trucks and buses. There's motorcycles as well in there, also auto care at level 2. So in England there's a far broad spread of apprenticeship standards available. Obviously in the other nations in the UK, but they're still continuing, and got a lot of apprenticeship routes available there also. So if you can share our website, it's got links and information about what apprenticeships are and how people will engage with them. The Auto City, which is the left-hand image that you can see, and just to be clear for everybody, these slide packs will come out to you as a PDF, and there'll be a hyperlink on all of these images so that it'll take you straight to the website. For some of the bits that Chris has shared earlier, you may need a login to get into them, but for Auto City and for the website here, they're public access. The Auto City site is a really useful function because it shows the full breadth of almost 150 different job roles that are available in the automotive retail sector. It will give you information in here that you can share on your own social platforms. You can link to. There are videos, interviews of people explaining what it's like working in the sector, and even a lot of information of the different job roles that you may find. So I know that some of you will already use this resource. I think now more than ever, trying to get information in front of potential future members of this sector that we all work in. Anything that we've got here that will help you, please use it. If you have any challenges or issues around that, then get in touch. You know, get in touch with us if there's certain information that you want to have access to or use for your customers and your apprentices as they're coming through and engaging with you. So, you know, I think it's clear that currently recruitment is probably going to be limited to online right now, as opposed to face-to-face interviews or face-to-face assessments. We'll know a bit more once we get an update from the government, likely to be by the weekend, as to how that social distance element's going to be managed. But you can engage with individuals through remote technology today. I'm sure you're all doing it through Microsoft Teams or Zoom or other technologies that are available. to keep in touch with your current learners or to keep in touch with staff and friends and family, using that type of mechanism to do interviews with potential candidates is also a great opportunity to keep things moving today while things are challenging. Hopefully that's supports you all a little bit. I know I've seen that a lot of you are doing some of this anyway, but sharing best practice in the current circumstances is definitely where we need to be right now. We're all in this together. We all want to make the best of this sector, and we all want to provide the best support and solution we can on bringing the future of the sector in during this difficult time.
Great stuff. Thanks, Mark. I think we're going to move on to Tony's section now, but just to remind everyone, if you do want to put a question, just use the Q&A function at the bottom, and we'll either take them live now or we'll leave them for the last 15-20 minutes. We're about halfway through now. So anyway, Tony, over to you to talk about the EPA side of things.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Morning, everybody. So just a quick update really on the IMI and what we've been doing over the last sort of 6 weeks, I suppose. Losing a bit of track of time, really. So I'm just going to cover a few points. I see a couple of questions have come in, which hopefully I'll cover off now. But as Matthew said, we will take additional questions and get back to them a little bit later. So planning for EPA and what is the IMI currently doing? Well, at the moment, we're still taking EPA bookings. We've got live EPA taking place as we speak. So some of the EPA activities, we have alternative methods for conducting those activities, which we have in place. So please have a look at our website, where I believe there is a link on the last slide of this presentation. We are doing weekly updates on what we are offering with regard to EPA events. We are updating that, as I say, on a weekly basis, so please keep an eye on that. So the booking process, we have amended our booking process to facilitate some of the alternative assessments. The main one being remote invigilation for EPA online knowledge tests, which we have in place, and we are actually running with one of our centres today as we speak. There are remote invigilation assessments taking place. So please have a look at our booking process, have a look at our updates on the website. Straightforward enough process. Don't think that all EPA activities have stopped. They certainly haven't. So currently IMI offers 17 different standards. Out of those 17 standards, we now have facilities in place for 4 standards to be completed remotely in their entirety. Some of which we have actually completed. Finance route, for example, we've completed quite recently. So we have got 4 currently that we can do the whole EPA remote. We are having some challenges with some routes, mainly being the technical routes where the skills assessments are required. We are in constant discussion with the IFATE and the EQA providers for those different standards, trying to work a solution. And again, as soon as we get anything on that, we will update you as soon as possible. So out of those 17 standards, like I say, 4 available currently to be done, that can be done remotely in their entirety. We are waiting approval from Ofqual and the IFATE for 2 further standards to be offered remotely, all assessment types. Again, they're not the technical routes, unfortunately, yet, but we should be able to announce that at the beginning of next week, as soon as we get the final sign off by the IFATE and Ofqual for that. So like I say, please monitor our website. We are still active with EPA. We are conducting EPA activities. So reviews regarding EPA assessment. As I said, really, we're reviewing EPA assessment on a daily basis. We're in dialogue with all the regulators or the EQA providers for all the different standards, trying to look and facilitate alternative assessment types. That is ongoing on a daily basis. And as I say, we are now doing a weekly update on our website. So please have a look on that for any new announcements that will be put onto the website. Changes to the current endpoint assessment and the assessment window. Now, due to the additional constraints with EPA, there has been a 12-week extension to all assessment windows. So whether that's 3-month assessment window or 6-month assessment window, as stated in the assessment plans, there is an automatic 12-week extension to that. So you have got a little bit more leeway with regard to scheduling EPA. And that 12-week extension, it has been stated that if required, that will be reviewed further. So the constraints with regard to the times on the assessment windows, they are a little more flexible, and it has been quoted that they will be reviewed further if required. So again, bear that in mind when you're booking EPA. Don't think that everything has to be done in the same constraint with regard to timings. There's also been agreement from the IFATE and the EQA providers that the order of assessments can now be in any order. So for light vehicle level 3 standard, for example, that was mandated that all apprentices had to pass both online tests before progressing, or before they were allowed to progress further onto the skills assessments. That now has been relaxed. And in reality, that apprentice on that route, light vehicle route, could start their EPA with the professional discussion, for example, and then do the online knowledge test. So that has been relaxed, and that's across all standards. So it's the same for all the technical routes. If apprentices are partway through the EPA, where heavy vehicle, for example, is a good one to look at with this, where they may have failed knowledge but gone on and progressed and completed their skills and professional discussion, they can now actually take their online assessments remotely, which we will invigilate. We have a full process for that. So again, get in touch with us if you have any apprentices in that scenario. Finally, I think there was a question that came up actually, Shane, with regard to apprenticeship frameworks. As we currently sit today, there is no extension to apprenticeship frameworks. They will cease for registration end of July 2020. There have been some indication that there may be discussions about possibly extending, but as we sit currently, there is no extension. So again, as soon as we have any updates on the apprenticeship frameworks, we will let you know with regard to that as well. Okay, thanks, Matthew. Great
stuff. Thank you, Tony. Well, I think we're pretty much ready to start taking questions. We've had a few through, so we had a couple through in advance, and we've had some coming through already, which is great. So thank you for that. Just to point out on the slide that you're now seeing in front of you, there's some useful links in there about EPA updates and the IMI's hub and etc. So please take a look at those. The webinar recording will be made available to everyone afterwards. So just to repeat, if you need to look back, listen back to anything, then please do. Right, okay, let's just kick off with some of the questions. I'm going to take one, I think put this one probably to you, Mark, that we got in last night from Ian, following on from last week's publication of the off-qual draft framework proposal, which contained 3 possible options for the assessment of existing qualifications. Are we any clearer as to the actual direction that will be recommended in respect of the estimation, adaptation, or delay of outcomes? Do you want to take that one on, Mark?
Yeah, of course, Matthew, and thanks to everybody that's put questions in so far. And as we've discussed earlier, we're going to do our best to answer them today, whether that's during the webinar or in an alternative format. With regards to the framework, some of you will have seen that Ofqual have put that out as a consultation for the last week and a bit. That consultation is due to expire on Friday. Friday's a bank holiday, so in reality that possibly will be on Thursday. But the consultation is very detailed. We've been doing a lot of work with all the regulators, not just Ofqual. Some of you may be aware that Ofqual are the key regulator for England, but there are other bodies that cover Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And we are all working together with all four of those regulators and all other awarding organisations. Myself and my team have been in a close dialogue with other awarding bodies as well that offer qualifications in the automotive sector, so City and Guilds, ABC, etc. So our development teams and quality teams have been in regular contact with other awarding bodies to make sure that there's a joined up approach here, which is going to be really, really useful to support you all. In the main, some of you will be aware that there are three key functional buckets, Ofqual are calling them, but functional areas for solutions. One being estimate, as Matthew mentioned a little while ago. An estimate is what's being used for GCSEs and A-levels. It's also going to be used for functional skills. So anybody that's got apprenticeship frameworks in England with functional skills will be working with their awarding organisation on estimation in the coming weeks. With regards to the other qualifications, all of the technical and non-technical qualifications that are offered either by ourselves, City and Guilds, ABC in this sector will fall into adapt or delay. On adaptation, the key focus is going to be about online tests. And as has been discussed earlier already, for EPA, for apprenticeship standards in England, online tests via remote invigilation is in the main already approved and already being utilised. For the online tests for qualifications, then remote invigilation is also a heavily weighted option, which Ofqual in principle are happy with, bearing in mind that we would probably do that through centres themselves. We've tested it with a couple of platforms, with Teams and with Zoom. So I know there's been some questions come through around using those formats, and we've tested both of those and they work really, really well. So there will be some support, guidance, training coming from ourselves to centres with online tests for qualifications imminently. No awarding body can do this yet, even though there's been some mixed messages out there, but nobody can do it yet until Ofqual have completed the consultation and completed and published the framework, which I would expect is going to be at the earliest next week. But some of you will have already had dialogue with your EQA around this. You certainly will have been providing data and information, as Steve mentioned earlier, to support the achievement of qualifications. So adaptation's a key one there for remote invigilation. As also discussed, there is some adaptation around possible VRQ, practical skills, possibly some simulation, but again, that would need to be covered with your EQA directly. If anybody's having any challenges or difficulties, either through contact or other things, then please get in touch. You know, we're here to support you. The third bucket is delay, and as Tony's already mentioned, on EPA, practical skills tasks will sit in the delay area, and in addition, a lot of the vocational qualification practical skills tasks will sit in the delay area across all awarding organisations, and that's what Ofqual are positioning right now in their framework. And as I mentioned earlier, that's a huge consideration for scheduling and resources, being able to take those through to completion either over the summer period or possibly at the beginning of the next academic year. hopefully that's covered where we are so far. As I mentioned earlier, we're working very closely on the consultation. In fact, some of my team are on workshops with them, with Ofqual today and tomorrow. So that we will keep on updating you, though.
Brilliant. Yeah, keep at it. I know your team's working really hard on it, Mark. So thanks for everything. I'm going to go to a question from Amandy, probably one for you, Tony. Where social distancing is not possible for EPA, can questioning and a professional interview be utilised?
Again, I think we have touched on this slightly. It depends on the actual route itself, the apprenticeship standard. Some routes for team leader, management, motor finance, we have full remote endpoint assessment available for that. For the technical routes, currently, no, we can't offer any other alternative for skills testing. But as I said earlier, we have got 2 further standards, the customer service level 2 and customer service level 3, which require observation. We have put a proposal forward for that with regard to alternative assessment, and we are awaiting approval for that, which I'm hoping for next week. But as I said, we're reviewing and we're trying to work with the EQA providers and the IFAT to put alternative assessments in place. But with the skills testing on the technical routes, that is proving rather challenging. But for other routes, yes, we have got alternative assessment in place, and we're awaiting further approval, like I say, for the customer service level 2 and 3. Hopefully next week we'll have approval for that as well.
Great. Thanks, Tony. There's a lot hopefully going to become a bit clearer next week, isn't there? All around the country. Next week's a big week. I'm going to put a question out to you from Hayley Pells. The third contributor to the apprenticeship is the employer. Is there a portal detailing the learner's progress and what they require to complete in a dashboard type format available? Getting this information from the learner is sometimes difficult, and it's also difficult at the moment to contact the college with specific questions regarding progress. Who would like to address that?
I'd be quite happy to take that one, Matthew.
Thanks, Chris.
It would depend on which logbook the training provider has chosen to use. The training provider could have chosen to use an IMI solution. And if they had used an IMIE logbook, then the employer and the mentor do have access to that logbook to check the learner's progression. If the logbook is provided by another source, then please contact your training provider and ask for access to that, because there are other solutions out there, but they're beyond our control. But certainly if it's an IMI logbook that the learner is using, that's been provided by that training provider, then yes, you should have access over.
Great. Thanks for that. Thank you, Chris. We've got a question from Sean. I think I'm probably going to put this one to you, Steve. And it's about practical tasks. If we have students who are progressing on to the next level of the course, can we not have them carry over practical tasks so that they can complete them at the start of the next course? And Sean makes the point that they could do the write-up to describe how to carry out the task and then carry out the practical later on when hopefully things are a bit more open.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. Sean, absolutely no restriction on that whatsoever when we get back into a place where they can carry out their assessments, because they may be moving on to a higher level, from level 1 to level 2 or level 2 to level 3. Any outstanding practical assessments from the previous level, of course, can be carried out when they are able to return to college or to the training provider. And if you just keep a record of those which were carried over and stay in touch with your EQA, your external quality assurer, that will be absolutely fine, Sean.
Great. Thank you for that. Steve, that's great. Don't feel shy, everyone. If there are some further questions that you'd like to have answered, then please put them through to us. I wanted just, as you're dreaming up questions, I wanted Chris to come back to you about the whole sort of, implied in your comments before was about communication, really about centres really communicating with learners, letting them know what the status is of their ongoing learning, what the next steps are likely to be, even if you don't have all the answers right now. Communication is the key, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. Keeping people engaged, keeping people busy and focused is clearly going to pay dividends whenever we get the shackles released from this lockdown. So if training providers have managed to have regular contact with learners, either if it's just to check in and see how they are, even if it's not formal learning, it will certainly help to keep the learner on track. Give them little bits of work to do, give them articles to read, give them things to watch. Most providers are doing this very well, actually, from the experience that I've seen over the last 6 weeks. So I think there's some very good practice already established. It does depend on the type of qualifications being offered as to whether the income still remains in place. For some of our training providers that don't receive government funded provision for their qualifications that they offer, clearly the cash flow will have stopped because they're not physically delivering the full cost training that they deliver. And in those cases, the majority of staff are furloughed. But for those training providers that do receive government funding for their qualifications and apprenticeships, and the learners aren't on breaks in learning, then the income is still coming in. And for those providers, most employees are still in place, working from home and engaging with their learners. So there's some very good practice happening already.
Great stuff, thank you. Got a question in from Craig, who says, for apprentices on the furlough scheme, can tutors or assessors send out work to be completed in order to continue gathering evidence towards 20% off the job training? Who'd like to take that one?
I'm happy to do that, Matthew.
Thank you, Mark.
Craig, thanks for the question. It's a topic that's been hot on the press, I think, for the last few weeks. There's a couple of points to this, just to be really clear. So any member of staff that's furloughed, which some of you unfortunately may be in that position that are online today, anyone that's furloughed, you shouldn't be doing any active work for your employer. There are key restrictions on that as part of the furlough scheme. However, one massive exemption that should be supporting you all right now, or all of the learners anyway, is that apprentices can still train and assess whilst they're furloughed. And definitely getting evidence towards 20% of off-the-job training will be a critical part there. So I've seen a number of you putting active information out there where you're continuing to train apprentices that are furloughed. In actual fact, we did an endpoint assessment on a furloughed apprentice only a couple of weeks ago. So that individual's been furloughed for a number of weeks and is able to actually complete their apprenticeship and come through the other end, successfully getting through their endpoint assessment. So Craig, it's a most definite yes. One part that we've been pushing back to the government on, though, is that there's some of you will be aware parts of the apprenticeship may need employer engagement from the mentor. So we've also tried to make it really clear that other members of staff, mentors, for example, should also be able to support that apprentice. That's a little bit less clear with government guidance, but it's critical in some cases that a mentor is able to participate or support the apprentice's progression. So hopefully I've answered Craig's question there. And for anyone else that was not sure, is 20% off the job training. Great opportunity to be driving that forward right now, even for apprentices that are furloughed.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark, for that. We have a question in from Darren, which we'll just deal with directly with you, Darren. I think we'll sort that one out direct. That looks pretty straightforward for the team. I mean, unless we got any more questions in, we'll look to close up in a minute. I just should say a couple of things. There are more webinars, IMI webinars, taking place next week. Once the government proposals for returning to work are through and there is a bit more clarity about that, then that gives the whole team at the IMI the chance to study those. And then we're going to have a session next week addressing many of those issues in detail, because we really will have a bit of a runway then back to, well, not, if not exactly normality, then something a bit closer to it. So keep your eye out for the webinars that we've got coming up next week. And in fact, if there are any other questions that you feel, or wider issues that you feel that we should address, then please get in touch with the IMI team and we'll put them on the agenda. Just another thing, while we've got your attention, this Friday is VE Anniversary Day. IMI is doing a lot of content about and stories and articles and social media around people in the automotive sector who've come from the military or indeed the other way round. We're calling it #MotorHeroes. So if you've got any good stories about that, then please share them, because there's some great people out there who move from different wings of the military into the automotive sector, and we'd love to celebrate some of them with you. So I think we're probably wrapping up for the day. Mark, I don't know whether there's any sort of wrap-up comments that you feel that we should do that you'd like to make before we tie up for the day?
Yeah, not a problem, Matthew. I think I just want to be just one part on frameworks, which were mentioned earlier, because I know there's some of you aren't operating solely in England. The Scottish regulator has performed a number of extensions on some qualifications automatically. So please look out for that information coming through. You know, this isn't all about apprenticeship standards, but if you have got learners on frameworks and the current timing has impacted your plans, then you know there's depending what the government do, there are one or two options. So as Tony mentioned, there is a possibility that the government will decide to extend registration windows on frameworks, but that isn't guaranteed as we sit here and now. If that does happen, then you will obviously need to rearrange your schedules to suit a new time frame. Should they decide that July is the end for frameworks in England, then progression can still be achieved through an appropriate apprenticeship standard on a reduced schedule, obviously with some pro rata funding as well, but you would be able to still take that learner through to, let's say, a level 3 apprenticeship standard if they'd completed a level 2 framework. So don't disregard that option with regards to progression, but I think we're going to have to wait and see what the government decide to do with framework closures in England. As I mentioned earlier, some Scottish qualifications have already been automatically extended, so please keep an eye on our websites for that information, or talk to your business development manager or EQA. Other than that, you know, it's been great to see you all actively driving the sector education forward over the last few weeks. I think we've all become very used to staring at a screen to communicate with others, which can be challenging sometimes. Make sure that you all stay safe and keep in touch. And I know that all of the teams at the IMI are looking forward to when we can physically get in and around with yourselves in your centres and in your workshops soon. So thank you for your time today.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Mark. And just to reiterate, we will be sharing the recording afterwards. So if you wanted to share the session with your own teams, then that will, of course, be possible. But now, Steve and Mark and Tony and Chris, thanks a lot for all your time. Thanks to everyone for all your questions. Stay safe and keep in touch on the IMI's COVID-19 hub and website, and we'll respond as quickly as we can. So have a good day, everybody, and thanks for all your time today. Thanks a lot. Thanks, guys.